You think you know who you are. You think you see the world clearly. But what if I told you that almost everything you hate about other people is just a mirror showing you what you refuse to see in yourself? And the worst part, you have no idea you're doing it. That's projection. And it's destroying your relationships, your peace, and your ability to ever truly know yourself. Today we're going inside one of the most dangerous patterns the human mind creates. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And your entire life will make sense in a way it never has before. Let's start with something simple. Think about someone you can't stand. Maybe it's a coworker who never stops talking about themselves. Maybe it's that friend who always plays the victim. Maybe it's someone who seems fake, always performing, never real. Now here's the uncomfortable question. What if the reason you notice these things so clearly in them is because they actually living inside you? What if your brain is showing you your own traits, but pretending they belong to someone else? This is psychological projection. And before you say, no way, not me, I need you to understand something. Projection is a defense mechanism where you unconsciously take your own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or behaviors and attribute them to another person. And the key word there is unconscious. You don't choose to do this. Your mind does it automatically to protect you from feeling things that are too painful to face. The concept comes from Sigmund Freud, who first described it in the 1890s. He defined projection as one person attributing their unacceptable impulses, such as thoughts, motives, and feelings, to another person. But it was Carl Jung who really understood the depth of this mechanism. Jung believed that failure to recognize and deal with shadow elements is often the root of problems between individuals and within groups, and it fuels prejudice between minority groups or countries, and can spark anything from an interpersonal row to a major war. Think about that. Wars, broken families, destroyed relationships, all because people refuse to look at themselves and instead see their darkness in everyone else. So why does your brain do this? Because shame is unbearable. Projection serves as a way to protect the ego from discomfort or anxiety by externalizing uncomfortable emotions rather than confronting them. When you feel something about yourself that contradicts who you think you are, your mind has a choice. Face the uncomfortable truth or find someone else to carry it for you. And most of the time, your mind chooses the second option without you even knowing. Let's make this real. Picture this. A man suspects his wife is cheating on him. He accuses her constantly. He checks her phone, questions where she's been, creates fights out of nothing. But here's the thing. She's not cheating. He is. Or at the very least, he wants to. Research has proven this pattern where a man who cheats on his spouse with a colleague suspects that his wife is being unfaithful and accuses her of infidelity instead. He can't face his own guilt, his own betrayal of values he claims to hold. So his mind projects it onto her. She becomes the cheater in his story, and he gets to stay the victim, the good guy, the one who's being wronged. This happens everywhere. At work, someone who struggles with their own competence will criticize everyone else for being incompetent. An employee struggling with their own abilities might constantly criticize a colleague for being unqualified. In friendships, someone who secretly feels jealous will accuse you of being jealous of them. In families, a parent who feels like a failure will tell their child they'll never amount to anything, projecting their shame onto someone smaller, someone easier to control. And here's what makes projection so dangerous. It doesn't just hurt the people around you, it keeps you trapped. Because as long as you're pointing at everyone else's darkness, you never have to face your own. Jung said, if you imagine someone brave enough to withdraw all their projections, you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow, someone who knows that whatever is wrong in the world is in themselves. Let me tell you how projection actually shows up in your life. Because the signs are everywhere once you know what to look for. You know that person who annoys you for no logical reason? That instant dislike you feel? That's often projection. When you have an irrational and automatic dislike for someone, especially when they haven't done anything to you, you might be projecting your own repressed characteristics onto them. Maybe they're confident and speak their mind, and you've spent your whole life making yourself small and quiet. Maybe they're emotional and messy, and you've been taught that showing feelings is weakness. Your shadow sees in them what you've buried in yourself, and it hates them for it. Projection shows up in accusations that seem oddly specific. When someone accuses you of something out of nowhere, something that doesn't match reality at all, they're probably projecting. If your partner accuses you of cheating when you're not, or says you're being abusive when you're setting boundaries, they might be projecting their own behaviors onto you. It's confusing, it's crazy making, because you know the truth, but they're so convinced of their version that you start questioning yourself. It shows up in the way you judge others. If you find yourself being overly critical of people, constantly noticing their flaws, always seeing what's wrong with them, that's a red flag. Being overly critical of everyone around you while never turning that critical eye on yourself is a sign that you reprojecting your own unacceptable traits onto others. Because what you judge harshest in others is usually what you can't accept in yourself, and it shows up in relationships where you keep having the same fight over and over, where you feel upset with your partner but can't explain why, where their reactions seem too big for what actually happened. Projection can wreak havoc on relationships by distorting communication and creating unnecessary conflict, eroding trust and intimacy over time. Because you're not actually fighting about what happened today. You're fighting about the unresolved stuff each of you is carrying and refusing to look at. Now here's where it gets deeper. Carl Jung called the part of you that holds all these rejected pieces your shadow. The shadow is composed of hidden aspects of your personality that are deemed unacceptable and tucked away into the hidden parts of your mind. It's not evil. It's not bad. It's just the parts of you that you learned weren't safe to show. The anger you were punished for as a child. The selfishness you were shamed for wanting. The sexuality you were told was dirty. The grief you were told to get over. The need for attention you learned was too much. All of that gets pushed down into your unconscious. And here's the problem. The shadow cannot be destroyed, and even if it is repressed into the darkness, its tentacles will still surface. It doesn't go away just because you pretend it's not there. Instead, it projects itself onto everyone around you. You see it in them because you refuse to see it in yourself. This is why you keep attracting the same type of person, the same difficult boss, the same toxic friend, the same unavailable partner. You think it's bad luck. You think it's them. But really, you're projecting the same unresolved pattern over and over, and the universe keeps sending you people to mirror it back until you finally look at yourself. Jung said something that still haunts me. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is, which means the more you deny your shadow, the more power it has over you. The more you refuse to see your darkness, the darker you become without knowing it. And this is where most people get stuck. Because acknowledging your shadow feels like admitting you're a bad person. It feels like saying you're selfish or angry or jealous or cruel. So you don't do it. You keep the projection going. You keep blaming everyone else. You keep finding evidence that you're right and they're wrong. But here's the truth. After projecting an element of your unconscious, the healthy thing to do is recognize the subjective origin of the projection, withdraw it from the external world, and integrate this element of your personality into conscious awareness. This is shadow work. This is the path to actually knowing yourself. So, how do you know if you're projecting? Here are the signs. You feel hyper-emotional about something small. If there's intensity around your experience, if you're having a visceral reaction that others can't quite understand, that's a sign you're projecting something onto someone else. Your heart is racing. Your hands are shaking. You're angrier or more hurt than the situation warrants. That's your shadow being triggered. You have the same conflict repeatedly with different people. If you frequently blame others for how you're feeling or for things going wrong, yet you're not taking inventory of what might be on your side of the street, that's projection. If every boss is terrible, if every friend betrays you, if every partner is toxic, the common denominator is you. And what you're projecting, you can't accept feedback without getting defensive. If you find it very difficult to accept any kind of criticism, even when it's constructive and loving, you might be protecting yourself through projection. Because feedback feels like an attack on your identity instead of information that could help you grow. And you assume everyone thinks like you do. You might make decisions without consulting your partner because you assume they share your opinion, when really you're projecting your preferences onto them. You can't imagine that people see things differently because you're too busy projecting your own perspective onto the world. Here's the moment that changes everything. The moment you realize you're doing it. The moment you see your projection for what it is. It's brutal because suddenly you can't blame them anymore. You can't say it's their fault, their problem, their darkness. You have to look at yourself and say, this is mine. This anger I see in them is actually mine. This selfishness I judge in them lives in me. This fear I criticize in them is my fear. Jung said the best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. Because when you stop projecting, you stop creating enemies. You stop making everyone else responsible for your pain. You stop fighting wars with people who are just mirrors showing you yourself. This doesn't mean everyone else is perfect. It doesn't mean you're wrong about everything you see. Sometimes people really are cruel or selfish or fake. But the question is, why does it bother you so much? Why does it trigger you? Why can't you just observe it and move on? The answer is usually because it's hitting something unresolved in you, something you haven't made peace with, something you're still carrying shame about. So what do? You start doing the work. You start asking yourself uncomfortable questions. When I judge this person, what am I really seeing? When I feel this intense reaction, what part of me is being activated? When I blame someone else, what am I avoiding in myself? You can ask yourself what part of your past this person's behavior reminds you of, who or what they remind you of, and what narratives you're constructing about them that might not be objectively true. You start treating your projections like information about yourself instead of facts about other people. You practice noticing the pattern. When you feel that surge of judgment or blame or anger, you pause, creating physical space, taking a walk. Bringing yourself into the present moment through your body and breath can help you get off the train of focusing on the other person. You give yourself space to feel what is actually happening inside you before you point it at someone else. And slowly, you start to integrate your shadow. You start to accept that you're not all good or all bad. You're human, you have darkness and light. You have impulses you don't act on. You have thoughts you don't share. You have parts of yourself you don't like, and that's okay. Awareness of an anger issue, selfishness, greed, or aggression grants you the opportunity to exert control over it and minimize its potential damage. This is how you stop destroying relationships. This is how you stop fighting with everyone. This is how you finally see people for who they actually are instead of who your projections made them. Because here's what nobody tells you. When you withdraw your projections, when you take back your shadow and own it, you become free. You stop needing everyone else to be a certain way. You stop trying to control how people see you. You stop defending yourself against attacks that weren't really about you in the first place. You realize that most of what you thought was happening between you and other people was actually just happening inside you. And that's both terrifying and liberating. Because it means you've been wrong about so much. But it also means you have the power to change it. Projection isn't something you'll ever completely stop doing. It's part of being human. But awareness changes everything. When you know you're projecting, you can catch it. You can pause. You can ask yourself what's really going on. You can take responsibility for your inner world instead of making it everyone else's problem. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to see people clearly for the first time. Not as reflections of your fears or fantasies. Not as carriers of your shadow. But as actual human beings with their own struggles, their own darkness, their own light. That's when real connection becomes possible. That's when you stop fighting and start understanding. That's when you finally stop running from yourself. Your shadow isn't going anywhere. But neither are you. And the moment you turn to face it instead of projecting it onto everyone around you, you become whole, conscious, awake, and that changes everything. If this hit you, watch the next video.